So let's take a look at the earliest stages of this police investigation here. I'm hearing a lot of discussion, and I mean a lot of discussion regarding Richard Allen putting himself near the crime scene or being on the trail that day, very near to where both Abigail Williams and Liberty German were found murdered. So did this individual actually insert himself into this police investigation? So let's assume for one moment that this information is factual, that Richard Allen inserts himself into this investigation at a very early stage. What are the possible consequences to the investigation as a whole? Well, if the police are looking at this case, they've discovered the crime scene, they've discovered the bodies of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. The first thing they're going to be doing is looking for witnesses, looking for people who are on the trail that day. Their initial suspicions are going to be drawn to the people who actually don't come forward. Let's say, for instance, they identify around 50 individuals who are on the trail. If they have, say, they can clear 40 of these individuals but have 10 left, naturally the focus is going to be on the individuals who don't come forward to volunteer their presence near to the crime scene. So really, it could have put Richard Allen towards the back of the queue very early on. Now, Richard Allen could have moved even further to the back of the queue if he had a plausible alibi. Now, we don't have any information regarding any sort of alibi or where he was, or even if he has come forward to insert himself into this investigation. At this stage, we simply do not have that information. But when we compare and contrast this to the behaviour of Ron Logan, now, let me just put this out there. I certainly don't believe that Ron Logan is the killer of these two poor girls. But when we compare and contrast the behaviour of these two individuals, there's a massive stark difference here. If Richard Allen has come forward and said, yep, I was there between whatever times he said he was, he had a plausible reason for being there maybe, and we combine that with Ron Logan's behaviour, an individual who's actually trying to distance himself from the crime scene when the crimes actually took place, then naturally your focus is going to be drawn to that particular individual. What this does not explain, however, is why it has taken almost 6 years to come full circle back towards Richard Allen. And the reason that I say that is because, quite naturally, we have this video, don't we? We have the video of the man walking across the bridge. Surely FBI would have dedicated quite a lot of resources to this particular video. Not just a description in terms of this man's facial features, but they're able to gauge a height from this individual, what he is wearing. This was a small individual, someone who's wearing oversized jeans. I mean, these are the first things that sort of strike you really about this particular video, is the guy's height and his clothing. So really, a lot of resources should have been allocated to this particular video. We're looking for a white individual, most likely someone middle-aged. Yet they've gone completely off of this individual who come forward at a very early stage. Now, all I can think of is that law enforcement had it in their head that there's no way that the killer's going to come forward. There's no way that the killer's going to come forward and place himself near the scene of the crime. They must have had that somewhere in their mind. They were looking for someone who was being elusive, someone that was hiding or hiding in plain sight, someone who's not going to be bold enough to come forward and actually put themselves at the scene of the crime when this crime took place. Also regarding the video, we have the voice, don't we? And I remember very early on in this case that we had a lot of heightened discussion regarding what his voice could tell us. It sounds gruff, it sounds like he's a drinker, it sounds like he's a smoker. Look at how he's walking across the bridge. This is someone who's had a drink. Now, I never really bought into all of that sort of stuff because, there's too many variables there, and especially due to the deterioration of the bridge, I always put the walk down to the fact that this guy was walking and his leg turns because he's repositioning, he doesn't want to fall through the bloody bridge, does he? That's basically what I put it down to when I view that clip of the man on the bridge. Not so much that he may have had a drink, but if that was such a hot topic of discussion as it was back when this case first originated, has this guy had a drink? Is he a smoker? Then surely at some point in time, those very questions are going to cross the mind of law enforcement. Is that guy on the bridge, is he under the influence? Does his voice tell us anything? Now, we're led to believe, and again, this is speculation here, I haven't had anything confirmed regarding this, but we're led to believe, or there's the possibility, I should say, that Richard Allen checked himself into some kind of rehab facility after these murders took place. Not only do we have a middle-aged white individual who puts himself near the scene of the crime on the day of the murders, potentially, But now we have someone who actually checks himself into a rehab facility shortly after the murders take place. Now, in my mind, the dots are starting to form already here. And you could be less than what? A month, a week, a few days after the murders. But for whatever reason, they've gone completely off of this guy here. They've gone completely away from Richard Allen. Another one of the more common questions that most people asked when they saw this man walking across the bridge and we had a discovery of the bodies of these two girls is, what exactly was this man's plan that day? Was this an abduction that went wrong? Was this an assault that went wrong? Did these two girls try to escape and they were subsequently murdered? Did this individual lose control? Murder was maybe not the first thing on his mind. Now, recently I watched a channel, a lady by the name of Pat Brown, who's a criminal profiler, and I think she makes a very, very valid point, especially if this individual walking across the bridge is actually Richard Allen. We need to remember here that this guy most likely, at least in terms of his facial features, isn't wearing any kind of disguise when he is approaching the girls. He's not wearing a mask, he doesn't appear to be wearing any kind of wig or anything across his face. So this was an individual who most likely had murder on the mind from the very outset. And quite clearly the reason that I say that is that this individual is approaching these girls and he's not really trying to hide his identity. Now, if this is Richard Allen, someone who lived just 2 miles from the bridge, then this isn't someone who's going to be letting witnesses go. You know, this isn't someone who's going to be assaulting these girls and letting them go with a full description of who attacked them. So I think she makes a very, very valid point there, that most likely murder was on the mind, that murder was the plan. That was the plan for that day, to take the lives of at least one individual. And, you know, and as I say, that's backed up by how that guy appears, the fact that he's not trying to hide himself. And you might say, well, he might not have known he was being recorded, but that's completely neither here nor there, because you wouldn't let 2 witnesses go alive if they had a full description of your face and you lived simply 2 miles away. You just wouldn't do that. So that gives us a good indication of what his plans were from the very outset. And also, just to tag on to that, this man, Richard Allen, was someone who actually worked in the community. He wasn't a hermit who was hiding in his house 24/7. This was someone who served out in the public and not just worked in a chemist, but actually frequented bars and was out walking around the town. So if this individual that we see in front of us here, if this is in fact Richard Allen, as I just said, most likely the plan all along was to take the lives of at least one individual. Now, the last little piece of information I'm going to share with you today comes in the form of the following photograph. Now, this is Richard Allen's daughter on the bridge in question, the Monon High Bridge. Now, a lot of people have taken a look at that photograph and said, Christ, you know, it was uploaded in 2018. This individual's gone back to the crime scene. What a sick individual. He's taken a photograph of his daughter there. Now, from what I've learned online, this photograph was actually taken back in 2012 as part of his daughter's graduation and then uploaded again in 2018. Now, I can't confirm that entirely, but I believe that to be the case. That this, as I say, is a photograph from 2012. But again here, what is taking place in terms of the investigation? A local man, white, middle-aged, someone who resembles the man on the bridge, someone who has knowledge of that area, a photograph of his daughter a few years earlier taken in that very same spot. Something in terms of law enforcement and the way that they looked into this case has gone wrong, I believe, somewhere along the line here. I don't believe it should have taken almost 6 years for Richard Allen to come back onto law enforcement radar. I'm not just talking about arrest or evidence, but it appears, as I said in a previous video from the Murder Sheet podcast released recently, that this was a case of Richard Allen coming back onto police radar. This wasn't a case of obtaining evidence and keeping a close eye on this individual. This was someone who has come to light again just recently.